All right, I want to welcome everyone. My name is Laura Hammond. I'm a staff person in the Experience and Professional Development, or XPD, office on campus. And today we're here to talk with alums about professional development topics. A variety of topics today with a wonderful group of alums who are sharing their time and wisdom with us today. So I'd like them to be able to start with introductions so you can learn a little bit about the talent that exists on this video today. So I'm going to invite Angie Kurtnick-Complin to start and share a little bit about herself.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here today and connect with some students virtually and some other alums. As Laura said, my name is Angie Kurtnick-Complin. I'm from the class of 2004. I was an accounting major, and I am currently the talent director at Granite Equity Partners. Joe?
Am I up? All right. Thanks for having me, everybody. My name is Joe Helsman. I'm a class of 2004 graduate. I also was an accounting major and was a CPA for 10 years at Deloitte, but I currently work at Hayes Companies as an insurance broker. And I also am an advisor on different boards and investments. Who's up next? Drew?
Yeah, thanks. My name is Drew Breyer. I'm a 2013 grad. I majored in communication, and I am currently a technical specialist at Microsoft. And Frida?
Okay, hi everybody. Frida Alvarez, she, her, hers. I graduated from St. Ben's in 2017, so just a few years ago. I majored in peace studies with a minor in poli-sci. I am a diversity recruiter and equal opportunity officer with the state of Minnesota's Employment and Economic Development Department.
Hi everyone, I'm Chris Heitzig. Graduated from St. John's in 2015. Where I study economics and philosophy. I currently work for the World Bank, but coincidentally, this is my last day today before I start a new job with Brookings on Monday. So yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you everyone for introducing yourselves. We've got some great insights to share with our students, so I want to start out by asking you all, how has COVID-19 and this pandemic that we're living through and in, how has it affected your organization? Joe, I know you had some insights you wanted to share. We'll start there.
Thanks, Laura. I'm going to address this maybe two different ways. Number one, I mentioned I'm on different boards of different companies and I'm an investor. And one of those investments is a company called Fanball, which is in the daily fantasy sports and season fantasy sports. And so, as you guys could imagine, there's no sports going on, so there's no revenue coming in. And so, obviously that is one of the tougher businesses that's impacted very heavily by this whole situation, just by nature of the industry. My day job is insurance brokerage, and any business needs insurance, whether that's employee benefits or workers' compensation or property. And so in that regard, it's a much, I want to call it, safer industry. We are in kind of the thick of things in terms of people asking us questions about whether certain coverages will apply. You know, businesses have shut down, and so is there business interruption coverage. On the flip side, if you're at work and you contract the virus and have to be quarantined for 2 weeks, does your workers' compensation kick in? And so I'm going to avoid getting into the very technical nuances of that. I think I might bore some people, but you know, we're living every single day with the COVID-19 situation. And then thirdly, my primary role is on business development. And so I'm in charge of bringing in new clients and getting them onboarded. And that's very difficult to do from my home. I used to be out with clients, breakfast, lunch, happy hour, sporting events. It was a very person-to-person business. And so I've had to really pivot and learn how to pick up the phone and do webinars. And I've been astounded at how much time I was spending going out and traveling to meetings. And so on one hand, I can be much more efficient. And on the other hand, I question whether I'm as effective over the phone.
Yeah, so we have been in the forefront, and I recruit specifically, just to clarify, within employment economic development, but my goal as a recruiter, kind of how Governor Walz talks about One Minnesota, that's always my goal too. So I'll kind of be talking a little bit broadly here, but So Governor Walz, has issued stay-at-home orders and all these things. And so a lot of us have started working from home. Over 600 of us are working from home now within the state. And so it's been a very long process getting everyone equipped to work from home because we need certain equipment and stuff at home that we don't have at work. So it's a lot of like kind of waiting and stuff too. So it's been an interesting transition. I did work from home part-time before. I'm someone with a disability. And so I have like a reasonable accommodation, which if you don't know what that is, you can talk to me because I know all about it. Well, a little bit of it anyways, and you can learn more about it. But anyways, so it's been interesting because DEED has been really, really affected. As DEED, we have unemployment insurance underneath us. And so we have been extremely overwhelmed. We went from having 40 to 60 calls an hour to over 2,000, 30-second wait times to over an hour wait time. So we have seen a definite increase in our needs for services. So although the governor put a hiring freeze on most state agencies, my agency, along with a couple of other ones, are still hiring as we provide critical services to Minnesotans.
I'm a talent director at Granite Equity Partners, and Granite Equity, for those that don't know, it's a mission-driven private investment firm. We're essentially a holding company. So there are 9 companies part of the Granite family. They're all in Minnesota here. So we're kind of a collective group of small to mid-sized businesses. And so you can imagine our work shifted dramatically when the crisis started. And it really started with ensuring that our employees, our people, there's 2,200 employees across those companies, making sure they were safe and protected and knew sort of the resources that they had. Many of our companies are in greater Minnesota. And so just really taking care of the employees. Then it really shifted to taking care of the business and planning appropriately. We're in the midst of, I think it's safe to say, a recession, and that has a really big impact on business. So it's been a lot of planning and preparing and communicating, which is so important right now. My day-to-day work was and still is kind of like Frida. I am in recruiting. So I am helping our companies hire key leaders. And so actually that work has continued, which I think is a testament to the strength of our companies. But you can imagine when you're calling on people to see if they're interested in a position, it's a different conversation. You want to be real, you want to be human, and just there's uncertainty out there. And, some people, unlike Chris, don't want to change jobs right now. And so you have to have really, I'd say, heart to heart, real, honest conversations. So I have found this whole experience has made us more human. Maybe my son will come running through. You just never know what's going to happen on these things. So I appreciate that. I like being real and honest. That's my style, always has been. And so I almost feel like we're allowed to be a little bit more of that now.
One of the common themes I heard throughout was that transition to working from home. Joe, you talked about the pivot to online meetings. Frida, you talked about transitioning from part-time work at home to full-time work at home. And Angie, you as well talked about that pivot to dealing with your son perhaps popping into a meeting. And so I'm wondering if we can start with Frida. Do you have any tips for students as they're doing school and then, perhaps this summer doing remote internships or remote jobs? What are some tips for them to consider as they're transitioning to working from home?
So I actually wasn't done being a student until just last year too. So I just finished grad school from St. Cloud State. So I'm very lucky, but also sad to had things not worked out for me because I would have been in the same boat with some of, the students that we have here today. And so Number one is don't be hard on yourself. You are going to school during a pandemic. No one has done that in my lifetime or your lifetime. So it's okay to struggle. It's okay to, excuse my French, but want to say F this, like for right now, because what's important is your sanity and to take care of yourself. And that's something I say because that's what I had to realize with myself too. I was feeling, bad that I wasn't as productive at home as I was at, you know, my office and stuff like that. But it was really needing to set a flow for me. And like I mentioned, I'm someone with a disability. I not only have physical disabilities, but I have mental disabilities as well, mental illness that I deal with. And so that kind of not hindered me, but slowed down my routine making. And now I've been working from home almost 2 months. Next week, I started working from home March 13th. And so it's been a while and I'm just starting to get a routine. So I just said I've been working from home since March 13th and I'm just now starting to get a routine down. And so it's been, you know, weeks for me. And so don't be hard on yourself and just remember that I'm a first gen student too. And so it would feel weird like reaching out, but I think right now more than ever, your professors are people as well. And they're also teaching in a pandemic when they've never had to teach in a pandemic, going from in-person to online transition in over a week, 2 weeks. Like I know at college level, our professors having like spring break and an extra week maybe to prepare. But think about our St. Paul, well, I'm from St. Paul, so think about our public schools, St. Paul public schools that overnight have encouraged distant learning. So I think grant your professors also the same grace and hope that they grant the grace to you as well. I think as part of our Benedictine values to extend that grace, especially during this time.
Well, it's interesting working at a company like Microsoft because a lot of what we actually produce as a product, like a large part of Microsoft's portfolio, is geared towards working remotely. It's like we've been preparing for this since 1980 or 1975. And so if you asked a lot of the executives, they'd say there was minimal impact to our business at Microsoft. But that said, being somebody that works in sales, a lot of my job entailed traveling and going to on-site sort of presentations and shaking hands and being able to assess body language and actually connecting one-to-one with our customers and with the internal team. So that said, from a sales perspective, it has changed remarkably. And so, it definitely takes a little bit extra effort of making sure, your audio is working, not to waste time doing things like that. Definitely reaching out to my manager more often and her reaching out to me. And one comment I just wanted to say, maybe this speaks more to talents and skills that are transferable. I'm big on this idea that IQ, being able to learn different things. Anybody can really learn the subject matter at hand, but that EQ sort of quotient, where are you able to express yourself and are you able to perceive what other people are expressing? That really takes that extra effort, and it's almost kind of uncomfortable, but having that kind of remote EQ is something that definitely takes just as much care and consideration as that in-person EQ that perhaps as somebody in field sales has been practicing for since I've been in it.
So a couple things are kind of crossing my mind. I think Frida hit on it a little bit of getting into a routine, and we all have our routines and our habits. We're creatures of habit. And I would say my first couple of weeks, I was kind of down in the dumps. I was like, God, what am I doing here? Like, I don't know how to reach out and do this and do that. And I had to really build up a routine. And I would say, how does that relate to the students that may be listening is think about that. As you get into your summer months, some of you are graduating and starting your careers. Some of you don't know if you're going to be doing a remote work environment next year or if you're going to be going back to campus, but whatever you're doing now is building a habit, you're creating a habit, and you're in this pivot point where you can control that. So don't feel like you're the victim. We're all dealing with uncertainty, and it all comes down to how we all individually deal with that and how we all pivot. So be very deliberate about how you create your habits. It took me a little time to adjust. And now, like I said, when I kicked it off, like I found ways to become more efficient. I actually slowed down. I was a creature of habit and trying to go build new relationships. And I realized I've got so many relationships. I got to go back to the ones that I started. And I found more success because now I'm following up with people and building deeper relationships, even though it's over the phone. So I would say keep some of that in mind. Give yourself a little credit, give yourself a little leeway, but ultimately, if you are pointing out at, circumstances, there's three fingers pointing back at you, and you should take control and do what you can to own it. So just some tips for success.
I'm going to start working remotely, and I'm going to be working remotely till at least June 1st. That's Brookings' policy that, company-wide, they're going to be working till June 1st and perhaps beyond. So I'm sort of sticking to the habits that I've developed over the last, month and a half, 2 months. And I think pretty much everyone on the panel has made some really good points. I think kind of like Frida said, that your emotional health is, I think, the number one thing. And if you don't take care of that, you're not going to have control over anything else in your life. So I think you really have to make sure and take care of that. I think the second point too is, everyone's different, and like what's productive, what's conducive to productivity for one person might not for another person. So I think it's really important to reflect and, reflect on the productive days and what really helped you be productive, and similarly for the unproductive days, and figure out what works for you. But that being said, I think like there is some common features, across most people. I think like exercise is super important. So for me myself, I like to take like a 15 to 20 minute walk after breakfast. And I find that helps immensely. And, even when I'm walking, I can talk to someone, like do a work call, or, just think about, some sort of aspect of my work. So it doesn't have to be entirely unproductive, but I find that it's very conducive to my my productivity and mental health. And then I think additionally, I can't remember, I think, was it Drew who mentioned it, like EQ. I think it's super important to have emotional intelligence, but in your household. Like now that we're forced to spend so much time at home, we're forced to spend time with the people, that we probably chose to live with, but maybe not bargained for that much time to spend with them. So for me, I live with 4 young professionals in DC, from kind of all different backgrounds and 3-4 different countries, and now we spend so much time together, and our relationships are absolutely amazing, but it's because we invested in them and had difficult conversations, and really we would have a weekly meeting to see what works, because some people would be on calls all day and some people wouldn't. So I think really investing in those relationships in your household and making sure those are intact are conducive to your happiness and productivity as well.
I'll throw it out to Drew to start, but what are some transferable skills you think are most important to highlight? I know, Drew, you touched on this a bit, but I wonder if you could expand on those liberal arts skills and transferable skills that you learned at St. Ben's and St. John's.
So I wouldn't say there was one kind of area within the liberal arts education where, wow, like I really apply that subject matter every day to my job. But that said, being able to synthesize information and take in, different sorts of communication methodologies, being able to speak with, Renee about metaphysics, the act of learning how to learn those things and how to articulate new subject matter is something that I practice every day, because the speed of innovation at a tech company is a million miles an hour. And it's like every few days, there's new licensing models, new products, new methodology to kind of transfer onto our customers that I need to be able to learn and be able to go through in a logical manner with my customers. So on top of that, learning how to learn, presentation and being able to work with the team to put together a presentation is also something, as somebody in sales, was instrumental to being able to make myself competitive in this marketplace.
Well, I would echo a lot of what Drew said. Very good. I can't emphasize communication enough. I think I shared that earlier, and this in a crisis, I don't think you can over communicate. Thinking critically, right? And this maybe comes to, you know, synthesize, it's kind of what Drew said, right? Synthesizing information, right? There's so much information, there's so much new information out there right now. And so being able to really think about what does that mean, right? What in you know, 10 steps ahead, looking at that, being confident and believing in who you are. You're a good person, you're smart, you can do good things, we will figure it out. And sort of trying to give yourself that boost to help you believe a little bit more.
Something Angie said kind of resonated with me, just in terms of, you know, this is all about what can students be doing right now. And I would say, I'm going to put a plug into tap into the Johnny Benny Network. You know, we've got interaction, we got various resources that you've got a wide variety of Johnnies and Bennies that are alums that are willing to sit down and pick up a phone call, and it's easier to do. This little, you know, panel webinar was way easier than it would have been 3 months ago, where I would have had to get in my car, go somewhere. Students would have had to show up. I mean, this is an example of how the whole world is going to be changing and pivoting. And so people, Johnnies and Bennies alums have volunteered to pick up the phone and have conversations with you, whether that's in your industry and field or whether you're thinking about trying to make a change. And Laura, I know you could probably give them some sort of references, but I would say tap into that network, and it goes back to owning it, right? It's on you to take the initiative and do something. There's a great network out there, but how you tap into it is up to you.
I was just going to make mention of everyone's email addresses in the squares here. So leverage all of us.
In the interest of time, I do want to throw just one more question out there. You all have given such great advice. And I think one of the things I've heard from the students I've connected with is really, you know, their questions about how do they search for jobs? How do they search for internships? And so I want to start, Frida, with you and ask, what suggestions do you have for those currently searching for jobs and internships?
The state is on a hiring freeze per Governor Walz's executive order, but there are still agencies hiring. Like I said, my agency, Employment and Economic Development, Department of Corrections, plug for Department of Corrections. They actually have a trainee correctional officer open position, which is an entry-level position, and it's one vacancy hiring for 100 positions all over Minnesota. So don't worry if you're not from the Twin Cities, if you're like from greater central Minnesota, they're hiring for all over. So connect with me if you're interested in corrections. There's also other correctional fields. If you know any nursing majors or you were involved in like health policy, or like health in general, like psychology or stuff like that. We have a lot of clinical psychologists that need to be hired in like our Department of Human Services. That's another agency that's still hiring. Department of Veteran Affairs is still hiring. Minnesota Management and Budget is still hiring. So we have more permanent jobs that are coming. At my agency, Employment and Economic Development, we're having disability examiner positions open. So connect with me on LinkedIn if you have one, and if you aren't connected with me yet, because I will be promoting those jobs soon. I believe they're going up tomorrow, and disability examiners are another great way to get your job, get your foot in the state. And so what a disability examiner does, by the way, is basically you work with the Social Security Administration, and you're basically evaluating people's disability claims so that they get paid. So it's very high reading comprehension and good writing skills, because you need to be able to summarize grand information and write it succinctly. So think of like literature reviews that we've done. And so going back to like the liberal arts skills that we've done, I mean, gives us our way to fit in any niche wherever we need to be. So disability examiners, again, connect with me because those are coming out soon. And I have a pretty good network with the other state of Minnesota recruiters. So please connect with me if you're looking for jobs. But unfortunately, because of the hiring freeze, we are not participating in internships this year. All state internships have been canceled. So no Right Track, no Step Up, no Urban Scholars will we be participating with for this year until next year. So internships, But other jobs, connect with me. They're out there. We have them. We're hiring. We're looking. We need you.
But I wanted to touch on what Angie said about confidence. And I think one of the most important things I've learned over my lifetime is that no one event will keep you from realizing your dreams, whether that be a failed class in college or a pandemic even. So just to bear that in mind when you're searching, it's definitely going to require a lot of hard work and resourcefulness, but no one event will keep you from realizing your dreams. So that said, I think the number one thing to getting a job really is to know what opportunities are out there. And I think that's something I struggled with as a student, is like I knew roughly what I wanted to do in my career, but I just didn't know who the main players were and what openings there were. So I think I did this for myself. I created a giant spreadsheet of like over 100 different places I'd like to work and different positions that are open there. And I did that by every time I encountered a position that interested me, I would look on LinkedIn and look at people who have held that position, and then they've had that held that position over time. So it could have been 5 years ago, it could be now, and just looking at what they did before that position and what they've done since, and you can find by doing that all sorts of similar positions that could interest you, and then just recording those down, because places that are similar, that have employed people who have had that job you wanted, are places that are probably going to post continually job openings, so you can sign up for their alerts if a new opening is posted. I think if you do this method, you'll quickly exhaust your sort of monthly limit on LinkedIn, so you might have to invest $40 per month in LinkedIn Premium, but the first month is free, so I think you can devote 2 months of your life to it and get a lot out of it. Yeah, and I guess just some quick advice when you're going through the interview process, because it's fresh in my mind since I recently went through it. I've had actually over 20 interviews this year already, so I'm well practiced. But I think my sort of method is, when I know who I'm going to interview with, is to read everything I can about their background, and then everything I can about the company and the division, and finally memorize the contents of the job description. So when they ask questions or you're discussing, you can use like words and phrases that really resonate not only with the job description, which is obviously important to check the boxes, but also words and phrases that resonate with the background of the person you're interviewing with, so that you not only meet the criteria, but that you leave some sort of like psychological mark on that person, so that they'll remember you. But yeah, if you want to, especially those students who are interested in economics related jobs, yeah, please send me an email. I'd be happy to talk about opportunities. I've been in your shoes before, so don't hesitate.
Double down on everything Chris said, especially being able to research and know everything about a company, their mission, and to be informed essentially about the job that you're applying for. But then also I wanted to say that it's not just having good responses to everything that an interviewer is going to ask, but to have good questions, because at the end of every interview, they're going to say, all right, so, the first half an hour of this was going to be, me asking you, but now we have 15 minutes for you. And my first couple interviews, I said, nope, I know everything I already need to know. But it took me a little bit of practice in that area to understand that that's just as much of an interview question as the rest of them. So definitely come prepared with questions, things that get them thinking about their mission. There's so many different sorts of questions you can ask. What's your management style? What are the strengths and weaknesses of your teams? There's all sorts of questions, but having that step before of knowing what you're going to ask,
touch on internships, since they kind of touched on the interviewing piece. So I've heard varying degrees. Some companies are keeping their interns, and then similar to what Frida said, some are not. I think some are even hosting virtual internships. And so I think you'll see kind of a little bit of everything. So don't give up hope. I still think that you can use the time in the summer to have a meaningful experience. And maybe that's some combination of, working at Target and setting up networking meetings with Benny Johnny alums through interaction, as Joe mentioned earlier. I know I think it's SEAM, Laura, but I don't know if that is happening in the summer, so I don't want to misspeak. The point is there's lots of Benny and Johnny alums out there that would love to have a meeting with you, kind of similar to what Chris mentioned earlier. Get curious about what they do, where they work, how they got there, what's their path, and I would ensure at the end, ask them if there's one person they think you should meet with, and then it creates a ripple effect, right? And it kind of, you do your work, right? You'll have another meeting and you never know. So don't give up. There's ways to have meaningful experiences and really make sure you leverage that Benny Johnny network to get some experience.
So I deal with a lot of CFOs and people in finance in transition because I'm on the board of financial executives. And so Angie's comment is a great one. You have to kind of work up the courage and ask for help. Just getting in front of a Johnny or Benny alum is asking for help, and they know it. They know why you're contacting them. And then asking for one connection is very polite. You can do that in many different ways, but ask for help. The other thing I would challenge you to think about 6 months, 12 months down the road. We're going to be coming out of this, and you may be interviewing, and that interview may say, what did you do, to land an internship or land a job? And so craft your story, right? I'm trying to tell you, begin with the end in mind. It's up to you to produce whatever that job opportunity is. It's not good enough to just go try and have one meeting a week, right? At the end of the day, you're going to want to look back and say, yeah, I had a lot of hard work and effort go into this, and I was the one that, successfully landed this job or this internship, or this is how I made a productive out of a difficult time. So think about that. That's what kind of motivates me sometimes to get through that tough time is, I can go through the motions and look back and have nothing to show for it. Or I know what's ultimately going to make me the most satisfied is being able to look back and say, look, I did this and it was a tough time. And nothing that's easy is ever worth it anyways. So
I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for your insights. And I want to encourage students to reach out to you to connect with the Benny Johnny Network and to learn even more from you. So in the interest of time, on behalf of XPD, I want to thank you and thank our students for tuning in to watch this webinar.